Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael, and I'm presenting alongside my group members, Gordon and Birgit. Now, for a quick overview of our table of contents. Our presentation explores the overarching question: how can trauma informed practices supported by the Berry Street education model improve student engagement and well-being in Australian secondary schools? To address this, we'll draw from key subtopics such as the principles of trauma and informed care alongside cultural and community considerations, understanding trauma, its impact on learning and legal implications, and the challenges and limitations of implementing trauma informed care. By combining research data from these areas to propose an effective intervention. As we move into context and problem identification, let's outline why this matters in Australian secondary schools. Prevalence of trauma in Australia data shows 42% of Australian adults, over 8 million, have experienced childhood trauma, raising mental health risk by 50%. This impacts many secondary students directly in classrooms. Impact on student learning and well-being. Trauma disrupts focus, motivation, and learning, leading to disengagement and poor well-being, a tough cycle without intervention. In Australia, stresses like socioeconomic issues amplify this. Classroom challenges in secondary schools. This causes disruptions, absenteeism, and gaps, especially for First Nations or low income students, due to intergenerational trauma. Our subtopic synthesis shows these issues persist system wide. Finally, need for intervention. That's why models like Berry Street trauma informed strategies are vital for safe environments and better outcomes. This leads us to the literature review.
We know from the neuroscience of trauma, particularly the work of Bruce Perry, that students cannot learn unless they first feel safe and regulated. Trauma impacts the areas of the brain responsible for decision making, attention, memory, and engagement. So before we can expect students to access the curriculum, we must ensure they experience predictability, calm, and connection in our learning spaces. This aligns strongly with the principles of trauma informed care, creating environments based on safety, trust, collaboration, empowerment, and cultural responsiveness. These aren't just ideals, they are the conditions that allow young people to take risks, engage with learning, and build healthy relationships with school. At the same time, the work of scholars like Geneva Gay and Russell Bishop remind us that well being and learning are inseparable from identity and belonging. When students feel their culture is understood, respected, and reflected in the classroom, they are more likely to engage, regulate, and succeed. When they don't, the learning environment can unintentionally cause cultural harm or reinforce discrimination. This is where the Berry Street education model becomes so powerful. Research by Brunzel and colleagues has shown that the Berry Street education model improves student engagement, regulation, and readiness to learn through predictable routines, relational practice, co-regulation, and strengths-based approaches. The Berry Street education model operates the key ideas from both trauma-informed practices and culturally responsive pedagogy. It gives us practical structure that supports safety both emotionally and culturally. For our school, the implementation is clear. If we want students to feel safe, valued, and ready to learn, then our routines and interactions must be intentional, predictable, and grounded in strong relationships. When we combine trauma-informed approaches with cultural responsiveness, we create classrooms where every student can show us their full selves and be met with understanding, consistency, and respect. Our next steps through the action research process allow us to trial, refine, and adapt these strategies so that general work for our students, our teachers, and our community context. This isn't about adopting a program, it's about shaping practice so that learning is possible for every young person who walks through our doors.
This rationale underscores the need for trauma informed approaches. The Berry Street model provides clear, evidence based strategies that support both learning and well being. A consistent school wide approach leads to safer, more regulated learning environments. The strategy. The program runs over one school term with 5 sessions focusing on the 5 Berry Street domains. These domains guide staff in understanding regulation, connection, stamina, engagement, and character development. The review cycle at the end of the term allows us to assess staff confidence, how strategies are being used, and any observable student impact. The expected outcomes. These outcomes highlight how the intervention strengthens co-regulation practices, improves engagement and emotional safety, and supports strong relationships, which is the key ingredient for student success.
Across Australian high schools, teachers are being increasingly confronted by the growing prevalence and complexity of student trauma. Students may suffer from trauma such as intergenerational trauma among Indigenous students, refugee displacement trauma, natural disaster trauma, or social disadvantage trauma. As such, educators must be equipped with the skills needed to help these students process their trauma and facilitate their social emotional regulation. As such, our proposed intervention will provide teachers with the strategies that they need to help those students while maintaining their well-being over the 5 fortnightly sessions that our intervention will provide. Our proposed intervention fits into the action research cycle in several ways. In the first stage, in the plan section of the action research cycle, professional learning sessions will be planned before they are administrated to teachers. During the ACT section of the action research cycle, fortnightly sessions over the course of a term will be provided to teachers. The teachers who participate in these sessions will gain professional learning on trauma, informed care, and the strategies that are associated with it to help support their students. After these sessions have been provided to teachers, during the observe phase of the action research cycle, we will be observing the impact that these sessions have had on both the teacher who participated and their students to assess how their well-being has improved and if their emotional regulation has become more stable. After the observation phase has finished, we will start to receive feedback from our participants. With the gathered feedback, we will make any needed changes to the sessions so that when they are done again with new teachers, that the sessions will be improved. Now, once the reflection has been received, as part of the loop part of the action research cycle, we will take this as part of our onboarding process for any new teachers. So when they join the school, they will be shown the sessions and taught about trauma-informed care. So when they start teaching their classes, they can start helping students deal with their social emotional regulation and help support their well-being. Also, teachers who haven't had a refresher in what trauma-informed care is in the last 3 years will also receive a refresher in this part of the action research cycle.
On this slide, we will look at the core findings from my survey of 8 pre-service teachers. The bar chart on the left highlights strong consensus on trauma significant impact on cognitive functions like attention and memory, with averages above 4 out of 5 showing why we need targeted strategies. Themes from open-ended questions like disruptive behaviors and ethical risks of stigma underscore real-world challenges. These insights directly informed our intervention by revealing gaps in knowledge and policy, pushing us towards a structured, evidence-based approach like Berry Street to build confidence and address these issues holistically. There is a link down the bottom if you would like to view questions. Thank you. On this slide, you can see how our survey findings directly shape the intervention design. Starting on the left, the data highlighted 3 critical areas: high impact ratings for trauma's disruption of learning, policy gaps around migration and disability, and strong ethical and legal concerns, especially mandatory reporting. Moving across the flowchart, these insights informed the intervention components on the right. The strategy was built around the Berry Street model, chosen because it addresses regulation, connection, and engagement. The rationale comes from the clear need for an evidence based trauma informed approach. that responds to both cognitive and ethical challenges. Finally, the expected outcomes include stronger co-regulation, improved emotional safety, and better student relationships. At the bottom, the timeline shows how this will be delivered: a one-term program with 5 structured sessions and a review cycle. This ensures the intervention is not only responsive to the survey findings, but also sustainable and measurable within the action research cycle.
In analyzing interview data from 9 staff members, a strong theme emerged around the importance of predictability as the foundation of trauma-informed care. Teachers consistently highlighted that students who have experienced trauma feel safer when routines are consistent, expectations are clear, and communication remains calm. This predictability reduced students' anxiety and supported regulation, which in turn made academic engagement possible. A second key finding was that trauma-informed care must be culturally responsive. Participants emphasized that well-being relies not only on emotional safety but also cultural safety. Students' identities cannot be separated from their trauma experiences, especially when trauma may be intergenerational or community-based, as seen for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander learners. Teachers clarified that avoiding cultural harm, validating identity, and embedding culture into learning were essential, not optional. Another significant finding was the importance of community partnerships. Teachers described elders, AEOs, youth workers, and families as crucial in building trust and supporting students' needs. These partnerships shape teachers' understanding of behavior and help them make culturally respectful decisions. Finally, teachers noted that regulation strategies must be culturally sensitive. Grounding strategies, sensory tools, and co-regulations were only effective when they respected cultural values and community norms. Together, these findings strongly support the implementation of the Berry Street education model. BSEM aligns with the interview data through predictable routines, adaptable culturally responsive strategies, and co-regulation practices that strengthen both emotional and cultural safety in the classroom. This slideshow shows how our interview findings directly shape the design of our intervention. First, staff repeatedly emphasized that emotional safety depends on predictable routines. Calm communication and consistent expectations help students regulate and access learning, so any intervention must prioritize structure. Next, teachers highlighted that cultural safety is a core part of trauma-informed care. They explained that identity cannot be separated from well-being, so lessons must avoid cultural harm and reflect students' community values. Participants also stressed that the importance of community partnerships. Elders, AEOs, youth workers, and families play a vital role in helping teachers make culturally respectful decisions. Finally, teachers said that regulation strategies should reflect cultural norms. Techniques such as grounding or co-regulation only work if they honor how different communities express emotion and build trust. These insights clearly support using the Berry Street education model. BSEM provides predictable routines, flexibility and culturally adaptable strategies, and co-regulation practices that protect both emotional and cultural safety.
On this slide, we will be looking at some synthesized data from my survey looking into the challenges and limitations of the implementation of trauma-informed care in Australian high schools. From the graphs provided, we can see that many of the participants that answered the survey were aware of what trauma-informed care was, but were not currently implementing it. Of the participants who were currently implementing it, one of the barriers that was consistently talked about in the implementation of trauma-informed care was inconsistencies in the implementation, with not every staff member having a consistent approach to its implementation. Having trauma-informed care be smoothly implemented into your school will be hard, as it requires a whole school approach. There were also other barriers that were pretty commonly talked about, like lack of support from senior executives or student pushback to a change in what they were already used to, which was the pre-existing framework of their school. Of the participants, those that were currently participating in trauma-informed care said that it was effective in helping their students and that they consistently saw a change for the better in their students once it was implemented properly. On this slide, We'll be looking at some of the challenges and limitations faced when implementing trauma-informed care into Australian high schools, and how these challenges and limitations have helped us design our intervention. Some of the challenges faced include the structural constraints of the school, lack of preparation time for staff, lack of professional learning for staff, the pre-established frameworks within the school, the staff well-being, and the cultural views within the school. Some limitations include a whole school approach, which is necessary for the implementation of trauma-informed care, preparation time for staff to implement trauma-informed care, and a consistent approach by the staff in implementing trauma-informed care. As such, understanding these challenges and limitations have helped us to design our intervention, as we must address as many of these in our intervention as we can to ensure a smooth implementation into the school's environment.
To measure whether our Berry Street intervention is working, we've selected data collection tools that capture both emotional and cultural safety, not just behavior. Firstly, we will use a BSEM-aligned observation checklist to document strategies used by teachers, such as predictable routines, co-regulation, and culturally responsive adjustments. This helps us collect evidence of consistent practice rather than just individual behavior changes. We'll also conduct student behavior and engagement scans to track how often students stay on task, participate, or become dysregulated. To include students' voice, we'll use short exit slips that ask questions such as, I felt safe, I understood my work, this lesson respected my culture. This ensures we're measuring the student's experience, not just the teacher's perception. Finally, teachers' reflection journals will record patterns in regulation, cultural safety, and successful adjustments across lessons. We will know the intervention is successful when dysregulation decreases, engagement increases, and students report feeling safe and respected. Teachers should also see fewer behavioral escalations and more consistent use of routines. Importantly, success isn't only less challenging behavior, it is evidence that students feel culturally and emotionally safe enough to learn. Our next cycle focuses on shifting from individual teacher practice to a whole school approach using the Berry Street education model. Our interviews made it clear that students depend on predictable routines, consistent co-regulation, and culturally respectful relationships to feel safe enough to learn. So the goal is in this cycle to establish BSEM-aligned routines across all classrooms and shared learning spaces, not just as a single faculty. This will be a collaborative process. Implementation will involve the teaching and learning team, year coordinators, wellbeing staff, AEOs, and classroom teachers, with support from school leadership. Together, we will prioritize consistent routines such as calm entry practices, emotional check-ins, and regulation strategies embedded into lesson flow. To evaluate impact, we will use observation tools aligned to BSEM, gather students' voice through short surveys, and support teachers to reflect on cultural and emotional safety in their practice. By doing this at whole school scale, we're aiming to reduce behavioral escalation, increase engagement, and build a learning culture where every student feels emotionally and culturally safe.
As we conclude, this slide focuses on ensuring continuous improvement to sustain the growth from our trauma-informed intervention. The cycle diagram illustrates how strategies like regular reflective cycles and PLSCs create a feedback loop, allowing us to adapt based on real-time data, much like the action research process itself. For instance, regular reviews will help embed Berry Street domains into daily practice, while monitoring outcomes ensures emotional safety and relationships remain priorities. By allocating resources and advocating for policy changes, we can make these practices a permanent part of high school environments, leading to lasting student success. This approach not only addresses the survey findings, but builds a resilient framework for future challenges.